big issue that we get a lot is the issue of alimony in our cases, where one spouse is seeking support from another.
This is a tough conversation with clients, and I'll start by just clarifying the actual word, because in Wisconsin, we say maintenance. If there's not a long enough term marriage and there's not an earning disparity between the parties, it's not going to be a maintenance case. You might have a massive earning disparity, but it's a 1-year marriage. Well, okay, you probably don't have a maintenance case. Or you have a 30-year marriage, but the parties are in the same dollar amount. It's not going to be a maintenance. Those two factors are hugely important. Other factors that also are important would be, there's 10 factors that the court can consider, but there's 2 that jump out that are going to be the most important is.
Well, hello and welcome to the Wisconsin Family Law Insider. My name is Jeff Hughes and I'm the CEO of Sterling Lawyers. We are a law firm focused exclusively on family law. I'm your co-host and I have with me Holly Mullin. Holly is our managing partner and she oversees our entire team of lawyers, paralegals, and legal assistants. So welcome, Holly.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
As you know, a big issue that we get a lot is the issue of alimony in our cases, where one spouse is seeking support from another. And that can be really bewildering to folks that are going through a divorce process. So if you could, let's walk through it from the very beginning and talk through how the process works, how judges decide issues of alimony in Wisconsin.
Yeah, so this is a tough conversation with clients. And I'll start by just clarifying the actual word, because in Wisconsin, we say maintenance. I always tell clients, look, it means the same thing as alimony or spousal support, but the word that you'll see in our statute books is maintenance. Mm-hmm. So I tell my clients, look, this is the grayest area of family law. With child support, I can, there's a black and white calculation. You give me the factors and I can spit out the number for you. And it's very straightforward. And with maintenance, it's sort of let's look at 10 different factors that the court might consider, and then it's a question of how much and for how long, and there's never guarantees and depends on what county you're in. So if you feel like you've gotten the runaround on it, it's actually probably good information, because there is just there isn't this straightforward black and white answer when it comes to maintenance. It's so very case specific. And I try to tell my clients, I don't care what your cousin's neighbor got, right? That is so wildly different than what's going on in your case. And so it's so tricky to compare it to anyone else's divorce because of how fact-specific maintenance really is.
And I tell clients on this issue all the time that it's real important to know the law and the factors, which we're going to cover here. But what I think is more important is knowing the judge.
Oh, it's so
the judge applies the law and every judge kind of sees it differently, it seems like, to some degree or another. Okay, so maintenance, same thing as alimony. So that's the word we use legally here in Wisconsin, is maintenance. So how is it this issue is resolved? How is it resolved in a divorce action?
So hopefully, along with all the other issues in the divorce, is that we're able to reach an agreement, right? That's always our goal in the divorce, is trying to negotiate an outcome that both people can live with. And we're going to rely on the statute and the case law to figure out, does our client have a good case or not, right? What's going on here? So important factors, and I would say there's 10, right? There's 10 factors that the court can consider, but there's kind of 2 that jump out that are going to be the most important, is length of marriage and earning disparity. Right. And the law does not say these are the most important 2. I'm just, in my experience, if there's not a long enough term marriage and there's not an earning disparity between the parties, it's not going to be a maintenance case. Yeah. So you might have a massive earning disparity, but it's a 1-year marriage. Well, okay, you probably don't have a maintenance case. Or you have a 30-year marriage, but the parties are in the same dollar amount. It's not going to be a maintenance case. So those 2 factors are hugely important. Other factors that also are important would be, what's the property division, meaning what assets do these people have that they may or may not be able to rely on? Educational level, how much training, certification, do they have the ability to go out there and earn money and they're not using it? So we call that earning capacity, meaning even even if it's not your actual income, what is your ability to go out there and earn income? That's earning capacity.
That's an area for a lot of quarrels, isn't it? Where you see
There is.
someone go out of the workforce for a number of years, and then the stereotype is the husband works, wife stays home, and then they're getting a divorce, and she's like, I can't earn that much, and he's a hard headed guy, and he's like, yeah, you can, and then there's a big fight over what she can actually earn, how long it would take her to get there. In those cases, I know you had some other factors to talk about, but in those cases, how is that resolved by the judge?
So earning capacity, I mean, if parties can always reach an agreement and say, hey, we think, based on your educational background and your level of experience, your age and health, we think you could earn 45,000 if you jumped back into the workforce, right? If the parties can agree, we're going to bring in an expert called a vocational evaluator. And they'll do an assessment, just like you can appraise a house. I mean, I know that sounds like, I don't know, kind of an icky comparison, but you can. I mean, right? Like, what's the fair market value of this residence? It's like you can kind of do a fair market evaluation of a human's ability to earn money. We call it a vocational evaluation, and it's based on what's your age, what's your health, what's your educational background, do you have any degrees or certification, what's your skills, when's the last time you were in the marketplace, right? Like, have you worked and been out of the workforce for 15 years and you're going to be rusty and need to kind of hone your skills all over again. So that vocational evaluation is typically an expert that's hired by, I mean, you can hire them mutually, like you agree on one person to do it, but often it's hired by just one party. Like, husband doesn't think wife is maximizing her earning capacity, so husband hires a vocational evaluator who's going to then meet with wife, do somewhat of an interview, look at their resume or CV, and then write a report, just like you have an appraisal report on property, right? You can have a vocational evaluation report that states the factors and how they came to the conclusion that this person in today's marketplace like has this ability to earn, and they can be called as a witness to testify about that person's earning potential.
Mm-hmm. So in those cases, have you seen that usually brings the parties together to get an agreement on what the other spouse can earn?
I mean, it really can help. Yeah. I mean, if somebody's saying, look, I haven't worked in 15 years, maybe this person's 50 years old and they stayed at home with the kids, but they're generally in good health, and they say, I couldn't possibly work. I have no skills. And so I want to say I can make minimum wage full time. Well, that's 15 grand a year, right?
Yeah.
Menards is hiring for $17 an hour, right?
Right.
So it's like a lot of these vocational evaluations are going to say even somebody who's totally unskilled, if they're in good health, they can go get a job making 35 to 40,000 a year. It absolutely does help. If you have somebody who's saying, I just can't do it, and you're able to push back and say, well, I have an expert who will testify that you can, then you better go get an expert testifying that you can't. And I think that's going to be hard. It's one thing if they're trying to impute earning capacity at 70 grand or something, but if that vocational evaluation comes in at that reasonable starting level, it's going to be tougher to combat. There's no doubt about it. But this can be used at any level. Let me be clear, right? Like, a vocational evaluation could be, I've seen them done in cash businesses, like hairstylists, who say that they make $30,000 a year. And maybe right, for a barber shop or something where it's relatively inexpensive haircuts and that kind of stuff. But if you have someone doing hair extensions and highlights, it's like, well, that business is going to generate a whole lot more than $30,000 a year of income. That person could make easily double that. And so it might be that the person's not denying that they're working and making money, but if they're in a cash business, this can help to prove what they could be earning. And if they're choosing to work for themselves, why are they making so much less than everybody else in the industry?
Yeah. You mentioned a pretty interesting word there. You said the word impute income. So I know you're walking through the different factors that the judges will consider for a ruling on maintenance. Um, if the parties can't agree on what the under earning or the lower earning spouse can earn, the judge will essentially impute income, right? Is that, am I saying that right?
Yeah, if the judge finds that a person has the ability to earn and they are under their earning potential, like they're
Hmm.
either not working at all or they're working at a job that is not paying them what they could reasonably earn based on their skills and their health. Imputing an income is essentially just a fancy word for saying assign you an income. Whether you're earning it or not, we're going to pretend like you are for purposes of calculating the support. So imputing an income is like, don't care what your paycheck says, this is what you could be making, and we're going to use that number when we calculate support. So imputing it is like assigning an income.
Okay, got it. So if the judge is called on to make a final ruling on the issue of maintenance, of course, the length of the marriage, that's all kind of fixed, right? And there's a determination on health and all that sort of stuff. If there's still not an agreement, the judge will say, okay, I'm going to assign you this dollar amount. I'm going to use that to then complete my ruling and issue an order.
Yeah, that's one of those. It's one of the factors that the court could,
Mhm.
right? Like depending on what evidence and arguments are presented to the judge, it's like that absolutely could be a factor at play.
Yeah.
Um, and when earnings aren't at issue, let's say the parties aren't arguing, it's like no, they both have W-2 jobs and somebody's making 45,000 and the other one's making 85,000. It's like, well, then those other factors are going to have a lot of influence on what a judge ultimately decides if the parties can't agree. It's like, well, did one spouse really contribute to the educational background or the earning potential of the higher earner? Like, we've heard the cases about the wife who stayed at home with the kids or worked part time to help put their spouse through medical school or dental school. Now they're a really high earner, and the mom has like really no earnings history, and so that contribution can be considered. And the contribution to the household, the contribution of being a stay at home parent allows the working parent to get to work earlier, stay at work later, and not have to come home when a kid is homesick from school. Like, all of those factors can be considered. How much they impact a case, again, totally depends on the facts and circumstances of that specific divorce case.
And we've talked in the past about the variance between the counties and maybe how they would take the exact same case, the exact same facts, and apply the law a little bit differently. Are there some rules of thumb that you generally look at and follow whenever you're advising clients on what they can expect for a maintenance payment, either paying it or receiving it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, and I think that comes as a surprise to a lot of people is like, well, it depends on the county, right?
Yeah.
I mean, most of the attorneys in our office will go to this seminar every year. It's called Divorce Wisconsin Style. And it's this great seminar where we have the panel of court commissioners in the morning, and then we have a panel of judges in the afternoon. And we get to hear from these different county commissioners and different county judges of like, if this was your case, same set of facts, what would you rule? And you hear like, wait, this is the exact same fact scenario. And in Milwaukee County, the judge would give X number of dollars of maintenance for X number of years. And in Waukesha, they're going to do half that amount or something. So it's like really, really interesting to hear how different judges will apply it. So it's important to get to know your judge and what
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
have tendency to do. Rule of thumb, I mean, I've heard a lot of judges say, look, in a marriage that's under 10 years, maintenance is unlikely. Now, again,
Mhm.
there's no black and white rule. I'm sure some
Right.
people listening to this
Yeah.
are like, well, hey, my marriage was only 7 years and I got maintenance. Like, yeah, I could name some of those that I've been a part of as well. So there's always going to be the naysayers and like people who fall outside of the generality. But I would say I wouldn't hang my hat on an absolute of maintenance if my marriage
Mhm.
was under 10 years. Um, and then once you start getting beyond that, you might, it's somewhere between a third of the length of the marriage to a half of the length of the marriage. If you're in that like 12 to 20-year marriage, and then you get into the long-term marriages that are over like 20, 25 years, something called indefinite maintenance. Indefinite maintenance, it means what it sounds like. There's going to be no endpoint that's laid out by the court. It doesn't mean infinite. It doesn't mean always and never ending. It just means indefinite. Like, we're not going to decide now when it ends. We're just going to let it play out. And if something changes in the future, then we'll deal with it. But for now, it's just going to be paid, period. So, yeah, I mean, and then the next question is how much? Well, if maintenance is going to be paid, it's going to be dependent on how much is needed, first and foremost. What's the budget? Like, does somebody have an illness? Is somebody have the kids in their care more, that they're trying to maintain the house and the expenses to keep the kids in the house? That could come in at play. So the budget matters. It really does. And then also just what's the proportion of net disposable income? Meaning after we pay taxes on the money, how much is each party left over with? Like, what do we have to meet our budget? And there's sometimes percentages that the court will use to reference that. Like, is it exactly equal 50-50 division of income? Or is it totally lopsided where somebody ends up with like 70% and the other one has 30? Okay, well, let's bridge that gap a little bit. Let's have the 70% person pay to the 30%, and now maybe it's not exactly equal, but it's like a 40-60, or it's a 45-55% split, and that starts feeling close enough. So there isn't, a rule that's going to say it has to be exactly 50-50, the way that the law is very clear when it comes to property division, on the presumption of equal. But there is some case law that says it's a good starting point for courts to consider an equal division of net disposable income, but there's not a requirement that that's where it ends.
Yeah. Wow, you've really threw out a lot of information there, Holly. So thank you for that, and thank you for walking us through how maintenance works in Wisconsin and how our judges are likely to rule on a maintenance case.
You bet.